This channel is now Patreon supported, and this video was brought to you by my patrons. If you would like more info on how you can support the channel, check out the link in the description. And viewer advisory, this video discusses a game that depicts grief and loss resulting from a car accident. I have a soft spot for those short games. You know, the ones that dwell on really strong emotions or themes. The kind of thing you can play in 1 or 2 sittings and are meant to leave you with a specific feeling, or tell a short story, or maybe just get you thinking about something you might not have considered before. They're essentially the gaming equivalent of fleeting moments or memories. The kind of thing that may or may not stick with you as time goes on, but may sneak back up on you when something reawakens those feelings, or they can become fond recollections you look back on often. I tend to play these games when they cross my path, and sometimes they have the intended effect. Sometimes they take a while to sink in before they mean something to me, and sometimes they find some other new unintended consequence in the way I end up thinking about them. Last Day of June is one of those games. It's a game that, by all accounts, probably would have passed me by without a whole lot of fanfare if it wasn't for one specific part of its wider composition that changed everything about the way the game struck me and what it wound up meaning to me. And I want to talk about what that thing was because it's not something I've ever really experienced in a video game before, and something that I'm willing to bet I will never experience again. To get us started, though, first let's talk about the game itself. Last Day of June is a 2017 game by Ovosonico that depicts the grieving process of a man named Carl, who lost the use of his legs in a car accident which also took the life of his wife, June. The game as a whole is mostly evocative of a wider emotional appeal while at the same time directly providing the player with a story and the implications therein. It features characters that more or less resemble puppets with very large heads, lacking any distinguishing facial features, relying instead on outward identifiers such as clothing and hairstyles to differentiate them. They provide no facial expressions and effectively communicate only through body language or pointing at things. In this way, the game plays out completely free of language. There is no point at which writing plays into the experience, and any speech is replaced by wordless vocalizations similar to The Sims, but even further removed from the implications of words being said. The tiny world and singular environment of the game is impossibly idyllic, saturated in gorgeous pastels, using every inch of its design to appear as the kind of country paradise no one in their right mind would ever turn down the chance to live in. Everything from the look of the game to its charmingly unconventional soundtrack to the way the characters live within it sells this paradise to the player. At the start of the game, the primary characters, Carl and June, live happily together in this quaint little paradise with their unnamed neighbors, and seem content to spend afternoons lounging in their living room chairs, painting pictures that get displayed around the house, and periodically visiting the local lake, a favorite spot of the young couple. An occasion for gift-giving has appeared in their lives, and June acquires a gift from the old man across the way, and we begin playing the game as June, wandering around the house looking for a place to present the gift. Along the way, we can infer what life is like for the couple, and learn things about June directly, both as a person and just what's going on in general. Once the game has established some interactions for the day, Carl and June connect and head off on their afternoon out. Everything is peaceful and serene until they are set upon by a thunderstorm that cuts their outing short. Following their rushed exit from the day at the lake, tragedy strikes when Carl is forced to swerve off the road, driving June and himself into a collision that sets up the beginning of the game. The progress of the game begins sometime later when Carl is living alone, using a wheelchair to get around, and begins to wander the neighborhood one night. Eventually he realizes that he can use the paintings June left behind in her art studio to recall memories of the day of the accident and view them from other perspectives. From this point, the game consists of Carl essentially going over the day of the accident, dissecting the ins and outs of what all happened that may or may not have led to the crash. We are able to change the variables surrounding these elements to try a new, slightly different version of that day. So in this way, it's a game about examining variables in a sequence as they are presented to you, and seeing how they fit together until the outcome we need appears. 4 characters, the kid, the best friend, the hunter, and the old man, all were present in the neighborhood and had a part in the motions and happenings of that fateful day. We have to use trial and error in a, thankfully, pretty narrowly focused scope to find our desired result. It's all handled pretty much in binary. The failure state of the game is our starting point, and changing a variable will invariably lead to progress. We play through the activities of all of the neighbors as we attempt to, one by one, remove obstacles in some pretty roundabout ways to see if we can cause the drive home to go safely. Choosing to fly a kite instead of playing with the dog means the kid doesn't chase his ball out onto the road. But then, as the best friend is moving her possessions to her new home out of town, they will topple off the bed of her truck because the rope she would have used to secure them is being used to fly said kite. But seriously, who flies a kite with Kernmantle rope? Whatever. It continues onwards like so. Figuring out this interplay and the other situations that arise is our ultimate goal. Putting time into the game will inevitably, barring disengagement from the player, lead to the way forward. There's no version of almost in the situations you play. You either successfully change the something that you're working on, or you don't. That's the majority of the game. You just get to wander through the little neighborhood as the various characters, learning about their days one at a time. The music maintains a calm serenade that is underlined by a melancholy, as though the soundtrack knows what this whole exercise is really about. Probably the most interesting interaction of the game is the optional side quest, if you want to call it that, where each character can go off of the beaten path to find collectible memories that tell happy, sad, or bittersweet stories, furthering these other characters of the game. Everybody also has a unique ability, so to speak, that they can use on things like gates or piles of leaves that can unlock access to these memories for the other characters. So changing between them and being thorough in your exploration offers a little something extra to the experience. Now, I will say that the game isn't quite as smooth as I might have implied up to this point. I played the game for 3.6 hours according to Steam, and more or less 100%ed the game, at least to the best of my understanding, but I didn't get all of the hidden achievements, so clearly there's some stuff that I missed. And I will say, the only reason I spent that long playing the game was because of the number of cutscenes that you need to watch again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Every time a variable is changed in this game, the game requires us to watch the same footage of the town clock tower chiming, followed by however the car crash plays out in the current configuration. Even just trying to collect the optional memories of the various characters requires us to go back to the art studio to change characters, which means we have to watch the car crash again. An initial count of the number of times I had to watch a permutation of the car accident is as many as 20 times, with 7 of them happening just in the first hour of gameplay alone. I will also say that the pace of the game itself drags somewhat. I understand that the goal is to have the player experience and live in as much of this environment as possible, and while the point does make itself clear, the constant switching of characters, which leads to reliving the car crash moment, only to change something so you can change yet another something, really starts to drag. Reliving the same gameplay moments over and over again, as well as the cinematics. And if the way the characters vocalize happens to annoy you, like it kind of does me, then it starts to really become a chore. But all in all, I would say Last Day of June is a pretty potent way of representing grief, regret, or even survivor guilt. Realizing and representing the way one might relive an event like this over and over again, looking for some kind of closure, a person to blame, or deeper reason for it happening. I'm not a psychologist, nor do I claim to know much about the topic at all, but I could see how this gameplay conceit effectively pulls its player into just the idea of relitigating a tragedy in the mind of a person who was affected by it. This is underlined by the game interspersing these flashback segments with slow, ponderous journeys through the now darkened and lifeless neighborhood, which was once so idyllic and life-giving, instead hosting flashes of Carl and June's life up to the day of the accident. And let me allay your concerns. The game definitely pulls itself together for the final stretch, offering an utterly heartbreaking final chapter to play through, and an ending that feels appropriate in the face of everything that came before it. So, that's my review of a game I kind of liked. It's functional and definitely has the potential to reach an audience who will meet it on the level that it's operating on. I'm just not sure I'm a member of that audience. But as I said before, it's a game that probably would have passed me by without a whole lot of fanfare were it not for the one unexpected element of its construction that really drew me into the game. It's something that, well, actually, I did see it coming. I just didn't think it would have the effect that it did on me. Because, plot twist time, it was the music. The music was my favorite part of the whole experience. It's what kept me going through to the end. It's the part that spoke to me the most in the whole experience, turning it into the kind of thing I couldn't get out of my head going forwards. Heck, it's the thing that convinced me to play this game in the first place. Let me explain. The soundtrack for Last Day of June was composed by English musician Steven Wilson, an intensely prolific multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, and performer with a career spanning from 1983 to the present day. What's more is that Last Day of June is directly based on one of his songs, more specifically its music video. The song is called Drive Home and is featured on Wilson's 2013 solo album The Raven That Refused to Sing and Other Stories. The game takes many of its visual cues and story concepts from the video, itself a stop-motion animated film directed by Jess and produced by Owl House Studios, who are included in the credits of the game. Wilson is probably best known as the guitarist, frontman, and main songwriter for the now disbanded, progressive, experimental, ambient rock, and sometimes heavy metal band Porcupine Tree, though his current and continuing solo career commands just as much, if not more, recognition. Heck, to call him prolific is lowballing it. During his time with Porcupine Tree, Steve Wilson was active and creatively involved in as many as 4 additional bands, which is to say nothing of his extensive collection of guest appearances and collaborations. This isn't even an 1/8 of them. These are just the ones that I've heard. Wikipedia lists as many as 43 of them, and that's not including the times that he was just producing or mixing albums for other artists. And I've been a fan of his since 2006. That's right, the band shirts are back. I don't actually have any Wilson Project shirts, but he did work with Opeth a bunch, although not this album. Ever since that day, all those years ago when I bought my first Porcupine Tree album, Steven Wilson's music has almost been a constant for me. The songs of his various projects have followed me through many of the major events in my life. Past friendships and relationships, old jobs I've had and hated, my first apartment, high points, low points, and everything in between. He's kind of always been there for me. And there's something in Wilson's extended catalog for just about any situation or mood you can imagine. He's not the kind of artist to stay in one place for long. Comparing Porcupine Tree's debut release with what would turn out to be their final album would have you wondering if these two bands would even tour together, let alone be the same band. Compare either of these to what he's up to these days, and it's the same question. You're not even guaranteed to get the same experience through the entirety of a single track, let alone an album. It's a catalog that contains everything from catchy radio rock to long, contemplative, abstract meditations. From calming, serene ballads and ambience to deep and powerful anger. His lyrics are interested in everything from bittersweet, nostalgic, youthful memories to loss and grieving, exploring conflicting emotional experiences, exciting romances, and tired relationships alike. Sometimes criticizing religion, the music industry at large, and even attempting at times to dive into the psychology of serial killers. There is something for everybody in this collection, from the joyfully uplifting to the powerfully upsetting. Yeah, to put it diplomatically, Wilson's work has historically been highly idiosyncratic, spanning genres and volumes alike, often taking the form of concept albums to one degree or another, and using abstract arrangements or instrumentation to make the music speak as loudly as the lyrics.
I love that you can write a beautiful ballad and you can destroy the mood completely with something unexpected, noise-like. I've always liked that. I've always admired people that go beyond,
His music and lyrics create mental images and feelings not many other artists, in my experience, can match. And he surrounds himself with people who can bring those feelings to life with all of the eccentricity and visual flair you would expect to accompany musical journeys like his. His music videos are otherworldly in a way that I don't think that word gets used to describe often enough. They don't even look like his music videos, and frankly I do them a disservice by calling them his music videos. They really are just amazing animated shorts that are set to Steven Wilson songs. So needless to say, the prospect of playing a game that was soundtracked by one of my all-time favorite recording artists, in fact cementing it as the first and to date only soundtrack he has been credited with, was a huge draw. I was first turned on to this game by a musically like-minded friend, and it sounded exciting to me. I really wanted to hear what this guy would do scoring a video game. And so, I was initially somewhat disappointed when that soundtrack revealed itself to be lightly remixed segments of pre-existing Steven Wilson songs with the vocals removed. At least a little bit of me was interested in playing Last Day of June in the hopes of hearing some new Wilson material. Shallow of me, I know, but I was pleasantly surprised by the way the soundtrack wound up working, specifically how it worked for me, and that pleasant surprise slowly turned into something else. It was a totally new experience hearing pieces of my favorite songs that I've known and loved for years reaching out to me through related media, which wound up becoming that one thing, that extra something special that drew me into the game. There are plenty of times that games hit me with great soundtracks, the music of which going on to carry connotations and memories of its own down the line, but I have never heard my favorite songs in this way before, curated and arranged into a piece of artistic expression like this. I don't really listen to the kind of music that gets licensed for needle drops in movies, let alone soundtracks in games.
What kind of music do you make?
Weird shit.
Yeah, see, he gets it. What's important to me here is that so much of Wilson's music, at least the stuff I've heard, is already hugely emotionally loaded for me. So many of his songs tend to stir up feelings of some kind or another, reaching far and wide within the boundaries of my emotional understanding. And it would be fully difficult to explain where exactly these feelings come from. A whole lot of flashes of memory of things that maybe I don't even fully remember myself. Inconsequential moments that I recall but can't imagine anybody else finding meaningful. So I think the easiest and clearest example I have of this is that somehow I have connected so thoroughly and properly Porcupine Tree's Deadwing album with the game Kingdom Hearts 2. I know it's a super weird and random association to make, but the music reminding me of that game is less that I think of them on the same level, and more that it brings me back to the summer of 2009, when I had just moved into my first apartment, got the PS2 hooked up, and just started playing one of my old favorite games. All while listening to the stack of albums a friend had just loaned me, one of which was Deadwing, an album that I ran out and bought for myself the first chance I got because I loved it that much. If I sat and thought about more songs or albums, I'm sure I could conjure up actual stories of where more of these feelings and connections come from, but in the end, I don't think that's what actually matters anymore. It's the feelings you take with you that do, the images you associate with them, the kind of thing that Wilson himself writes into his music directly, most notably with the recurring motif of passing trains that appears periodically in his lyrics.
Well, it's funny because people ask me quite a lot why are there trains so much in my songs, and there's a lot of references to trains and specifically decay and a kind of nostalgic view of trains. I grew up not right next to a station but quite near to a station, and now I have this kind of association of sound and feeling, trivial or otherwise, triggers off a whole kind of series of memories, feelings, smells, sights, sounds, and it all comes from just lying in bed when I was very young, hearing the sound of these trains kind of hissing in and out of the station.
So all of this is what really held up this game, adding a new layer of engagement for me. What was initially a desire to hear new original pieces by Wilson became an appreciation for hearing familiar passages of songs that are on some level important to me, backing a game that is itself intent on creating a strong emotional appeal. That's a powerful concoction right there. To put it simply, I connected with this game in a way that goes beyond what games normally do for me. It makes heavy use of tracks from albums that are longtime favorites and releases that are lesser known to me that I haven't put as much time into yet. Not to mention several tracks I hadn't heard at all at the time, prompting me to go and check them out, exposing me to new angles and facets of something I'm already passionate about. But to say that the soundtrack, just existing in the way that it does, is the thing that sold me on the game is cutting the discussion short. The use of Wilson's music in this game is what elevated it into a new space for me, not just because it might be personally more enjoyable for me to play, but because it causes circles of my real life and interests to collide in interesting ways, and that's what got me thinking. Ultimately, I see this game less as an exercise in changing the past, or even mourning it, and more of an adventure in memory creation. By the end of the game, and I'm so sorry, but I do have to spoil the ending to get to where it took me, though I'm going to start that particular explanation right now, but with the small stuff first and ramp up into the important bits as we go to give you a chance to make your exit if you would like to. When we have learned that there is nothing that can change that fateful day, what stuck with me wasn't the moment Carl smashes the paintings in defeated anger, how he finally decides to go back one more time and trade places in the car with June, or how he can't seem to bring himself to explain what's happening in that final moment. By the time the credits rolled, this game didn't exist in the moment for me. It was the day at the lake. It was wandering through the darkened neighborhood looking at moments of life together. It was the memory pictures we collected as the other characters. It was flying a kite with someone close to you, saying goodbye to a home you are departing, remembering a life lived and loved, even if it was complicated. The moment that the game did sink in for me, removed from this weird metatextual zone the soundtrack dragged me into, was when we find June's sketchbook at the end of it all, filled with her angry scribblings and sketches that perfectly mirror our own endeavors in this game, ending with that one last look at her sketch of Carl in the superhero costume. June, having been the one to survive the crash after all, lives on, thinking back to that day, taking it with her into the future and letting it become memory, images and flashes of emotion that spring up from time to time when something like a rainy day, a nice painting, or a favorite song evokes that feeling again. This game is packed with exactly those kinds of moments, the small pauses as characters stop to reflect on something remembered or realized. We can infer what is going through the minds of these characters. There are clues all over the place, either within the story of the game or the memory pictures we find, but none of them are given as much to work with as this one right here. After the credits have rolled, we watch one final scene where June, once again visiting the lake years later, is offered a flower by her son, who is the spitting image of his dad, in the same place where June last spent time with his father, her husband. And she is so overcome with all of the feelings we have just seen and experienced in the game thus far that she can't help herself but give him a big old hug. We have seen every single moment of what led to this reaction from June, and here at the end of it all, it's not trying to use this moment to imply something, to tell us a story or teach us about a character, about their attitudes and backstory, as moments like this usually are there to do for us. It's there to finish it, placing everything we've just been through as a player into its final context. The origin of that small pause in the day where we let some time wash over us as we indulge a bit of emotion, not necessarily knowing where it came from, just that it is here. This game helped me explore that moment. Not exactly what June has experienced, I haven't come across grief or loss on that level before, but just that kind of moment, as I encounter them. Even if the text of the game, as in what happens in it, didn't speak to me as loudly as it may have wanted to, it still put me onto the path of how to understand it in my own context, showing me the steps it takes to get here by likening it to my own cherished, soured, or complicated recollections through music. This game used a piece of my real world to make a real connection with me, all because someone at Ovosonico decided to go with some of my favorite music to score this game. The work of an artist who almost specializes in exactly this kind of sentimentality, anxiety, and reflection, taking me on a journey through my own thoughts, memories, and feelings. One of my favorite things in life is seeing someone out in public wearing a band shirt from a group that I know. And it doesn't even really need to be one that I'm a fan of. As long as it's in the same ballpark, that's awesome. Knowing that I already kind of have something in common with a total stranger, like we're in a secret club together, is kind of a thrill. Playing Last Day of June hits really close to that moment for me. It's like I just saw someone wearing a porcupine tree shirt at the mall or the grocery store. Someone who I can bet sees and feels something like what I do when I hear this music, who has their own flashes of memory or formless feeling brought forward by the same catalyst. That kind of common ground can go a long way. So many of my favorite interactions in life have been just talking music, taking a moment to enjoy that connection with another person. But now, here, having played Last Day of June, I can't help but think maybe someone at Ovosonico rocks In Absentia on long drives just like me, listens to Stars Die every time they need to feel a little bit sad, heard Grace for Drowning for the first time and was hopefully as confused as I was, has a favorite moment of Hand Cannot Erase, and has their mind blown by Ancestral every time they hear it too. And I guess it doesn't matter who over there is the Wilson fan. What matters is they heard this music, saw this beautiful animation, had their own inspiration and emotional power moment, and made something out of it that the world could see and feel. I sometimes wonder what it might look like if I tried to translate those kinds of feelings or moments into something tangible to share with others, and I can only hope that I would land at something as clever as Last Day of June. Beyond just adapting a fascinating piece of animation, more than just telling us the story of Carl and June, there is a feeling created here, a place, flashes of lives lived, a game that is something more than just about a car accident. consistently drawing attention to these moments of recollection and reflection, all while showing us the building blocks of where those moments come from, the kind of thing we all experience in our own way, even if we don't really know it's happening.